This work is part of our ongoing research, which try to build um, a relevant learning profile that can enable policymakers and researchers track and measure the progress so far achieved on SDG 4 in Nigeria. In this study, we reflect on depth and drivers of learning crisis in Nigeria using an approach that tries to match curriculum with existing population-based surveys. So, the key story behind SDG 4 is well known. I mean, when you look at the transition from MDG's era to the present SDG, um, the key shortcomings is that during MDG, it's all about expanding learning. And a lot of evidence already shows that that does not translate into learning. And SDG 4 is a way to correct that by explicitly emphasizing on inclusive and quality education for all. However, while the target is easy to divine, it has proven very difficult for many countries to track progress on SDG 4 in many developing countries like Nigeria. And this data shortcomings has a lot of implication for policymakers. So, for instance, in the absence of data on outcomes that can be tracked over time, you have this poor guidance around how effective or how productive is education investment. The best and effective practice are also not known. And so, if there is need to scale up any kind of interventions, which one is actually not accurately so policymakers are not so sure about that. And also, we need to recognize that if we can't measure it, we can't improve it. And for that reason, there is need for us to try and reflect how can we look at into the progress that countries are making. Now, the key story in our paper is to illustrate with an example of Nigeria that there are ways that developing countries can make use of some of the existing data in order to ensure that they look and gauge into what is really going on. Maybe they are making progress and use this to in order to frame some policy options as regards to achieving inclusive and quality education. So, if we look at what is the present state of education in Nigeria in terms of available data to track Agenda 2030, which emphasizes on that nobody should be left behind. So, if nobody is left behind, there are some data requirements that we can think of. One, you want data set that is nationally representative, that means cover every nook and crannies of a country. Even though it covers everywhere, you want it to be disaggregated so that we can really identify who are left behind, who are the vulnerable groups, why are they being left behind. So those are the kind of critical questions for to measure and track progress. It has to be periodic because you can only see progress when you look at periodic data that are also comparable. It needs to be contemporaneous. It has to talk to it has to be timely in such a way that it relates to education system, not something in the past. So, like BHS, like MICs, these are adult retrospective assessment. As such, they reflect on past state of the education, not the present circumstances through which the education system in a country is passing through. And also, if we see this through the lens of the recent World Bank education poverty measure. You want an assessment data to have and cover in-school children and out-of-school children. Now, looking at the 6 different data sets that we have in Nigeria, we can see that only one data set tick all the boxes here, which is the Nigerian Education Data Survey. But when we look at the second table that shows the results that is derived from this kind of assessment, one thing is clear, about that data, that the result from NIM seems or is above all other estimates. And if we interpret it in the context of what we know about the state of learning crisis in the sub-Saharan region. So let's say, for instance, according to World Bank, 87% of kids in sub-Saharan Africa are not learning, which they define as learning poverty. If we try to look at that metric and what is happening, I mean, by any stretch, and using next data set, we can't say this is education system is in crisis by any stretch. But in our conversation, I mean, at the local level with policymakers around, I mean, we have had this conversation whereby they point to us that the NIST data set is wrong. There's a lot of challenges with it, and for that reason, it's not something that is useful in tracking SDG 4 or Agenda 2030. And we ask this question: if a data set meets almost all the desirable qualities of what is needed to measure the SDG 4, and now policymakers quite skeptical about the kind of message is passing that is too or overly optimistic, then there is an issue. And that's actually the problem that we try to tackle in this paper, to use what are the source of these challenges, how can we resolve them, and how can we ensure that we make use of these good data sets in order to look at what's the real state and status of things as it relates to education system in Nigeria. Now, just a little bit brief discussion about what NIST dataset covers. So it's kind of periodic data set that gives an assessment that is contemporaneous cross-sectional learning profile. That means, I mean, it tests kids while in school, but it also covers those out of school. And the important thing about NIST is it covers both literacy and numeracy. And in testing this, kids are tested about their ability to read words, read sentence, and comprehend, ability to do subtraction, addition, and double-digit addition. And in all of this, when you had the school children in the first 10 years of schooling, which is basic education in Nigeria, were given this test. So they didn't differentiate among grade level. Each kid are assessed the same way, and it is this evaluation that makes up what we call the National Education Data Survey. Now, the question is, if we look at it critically, at some point in time, we might argue that the kind of assessment or the kind of test that is in need is too low for some grade level, I mean, especially the higher grade level. We can also make the similar argument that at some lower level, it might be too much for them. So at the end of the day, we can have this issue of overestimation or underestimation of this. And we don't expect that this overestimation and underestimation will correct itself. So that actually is the source of this overestimation that policymakers are referring to. And so what we did in this paper is to say, okay, how can we correct this in order to ensure that this data set is not just discarded or put on the shelf, but it becomes a useful tool for conversation around education performance in the country. And what we did is to analyze and say, okay, what does Nigerian education curriculum look like? So if we look at this basic education level that is being tested, can we actually derive what we call a minimum expected competency level, which is a kind of pass mark for you to say, okay, you've adequately qualified for this grade level. And what we did is we divide an education year into three, which we call first and third, second term and third term, which is actually how Nigerian education system is grouped. We only consider subject matter in mathematics and English that is repeated in first term, second term, third term. And so if a concept, say division, is introduced in the third term, we don't consider it as part of minimum proficiency, because we believe that if it is introduced in a term, it is built upon in the next grade. So for that grade level, we think things that the system is trying to reinforce. And so we use this to define what we call minimum expected competency level. And we did it for mathematics, English, and in native languages. They were tested in it. And after this, we call in subject experts, teachers, and the rest to ensure that they validate what we've done, to ensure that we were able to match tests with the curriculum. So at the end of our approach, what we derive is we're able to say, okay, this is what is tested in this. This is what minimum expected competency in the curriculum look like. So is there a match or mismatch? If there is match or mismatch, where are they, and what are they? And if after our analysis, what we find out is that what is tested in this data actually relates to mostly pupils around primary one, which is grade 1 and grade 2, and some of grade 3. But if we limit it to these 3 grades, it has sufficiently covered what we if we limit it to the first 2 grades, primary and primary, it actually covered what is expected for a learner to pick out of school at that level. And if we do this, we can estimate the learning performance per each grade level. Then we can also construct what is the value addition at each higher level, such as we can use this to impute and compute curriculum pace, how far ahead is the curriculum above learners' ability, residual knowledge. We can use this or we can also bring in the out of school children to see what is the value addition of those in school vis-a-vis those out of school. So those are the kind of with the simple improvements we illustrate, these are the kind of ideas, extension that this allows us to be. But I will just discuss the result in terms of after correcting it, then comparing what we have in the previous table now with the correction. And when we see the what we call the new quality indicator, compared to it, we can see the performance is lower. And if you compare it with other assessments, you can there is this kind of similarities that it is quite comparable with what we have in this other assessment. So in essence, what we did is to correct this mismatch and ensure that what we now have quite reflects the state of things as it relates to education, the Nigerian education system. Now, but for a policymaker, this is not enough. I mean, what we've done can be summarized as trying to look at the depth of learning crisis in the country. But if you know the depth, what about the drivers? Because that's actually what actually yielded the kind of variables that policy can fine-tune in order to improve outcomes, or in order to ensure that you fast-track progress towards meeting your target for XDG4. And so what we do is to work with this education production function that specify an outcome, and this outcome is uh, whether you pass or fail, which is going to school, uh, the outcomes that could come out of that intervention of going to school. Now we now model that as a function of three critical factors. One are the innate and household factors uh, around the child. The second one is the parental investment. How much money or time does the parent invest into education of their child? Then we look at the third one, which has to do with school characteristics in terms of teachers and school facilities. And when we do this analysis, this is what the results show. Like I mentioned, okay, so one, we didn't see any gender differences, and if you look at the initial table I showed you, we can see that there is not much gender differences in performance. So again, we confirm this, that there is no gender differences in the probability of education performance. However, when we look at the distribution of wealth, income class of student household is an important marker to the education performance. Students from household in the highest wealth quintile are approximately twice more likely to perform better in both literacy and numeracy tests than students in the lowest wealth quintile. Also, parents with post-secondary education improves the odd ratio of their kids' education performance. So those with at least more than secondary education perform better than those with secondary, primary, or no education, which means education of parents is quite important. But the factors that we find to be quite important, or the most important among what we describe as the innate and household characteristics, is the factor of whether a child attend preschool or not. So in terms of the marginal effect and robustness, this is actually the most crucial factors among the innate and household characteristics, which illustrates, I mean, the vast literature on early childhood development and the importance of government investment and attention towards this level of education. So, for the result in terms of pupils perception, so the parents were asked, the parents and pupils, they were surveyed, were asked the question about their perception on teachers' performance, their perception on teachers' attendance, class overcrowding, how caring is the teacher towards their kid, school administration, school facilities. And what we observe is that the most important factor here is teachers' attendance. Even it, in terms of its influence on this result, is much more important and more consistent than teachers' performance. School administration has no effect at all, which is quite surprising. Physical facilities also play a role. So, I mean, the important thing here is that teachers going to school and the kind of facilities around the school are the major important factors. But when we go down and look at parental involvement, how much parents invest in terms of paying various fees like exam fees, developmental fee, school supplies, and the rest. I mean, these are variable that captures how much parent is invested in education. We find out that most of these factors are significant, and various robustness check show to us that this is the most important kind of driver of the difference between those that perform very well and those that don't perform very well. So we can think of the perception about school quality and the school characteristics as kind of supply side factor. And when you compare this supply side factor, I mean those things that government provide and those things that parents are expected to provide in terms of motivation, investment, and the rest, you find out that the parental kind of side of the equation tends to actually become more prominent. So it speaks to a growing research and part of ongoing RISE research in Nigeria that focuses on demand side issue around education and try to look at how do we manufacture or generate this factor, and to what extent have they proven to be important to education both in the past and the present context. So what are our key takeaways? Number one, overall, our indicator reveals that there is indeed learning crisis in Nigeria, as the majority of the students do not meet what is defined as the minimum competency at their respective grade level. Also, the analysis shows that four distinct groups of people are those that are mostly excluded from quality education in Nigeria. Number one are these children in rural areas. Secondly are pupils attending government schools, and third are children from poor households, and number four are children of school age from the northern part of the country. Also, one of the analysis, as I mentioned, is the curriculum page that this analysis can enable us. And we did this, of course, I didn't show all the results, but one thing to emphasize here is that as these kids transit to higher level, learning deficiency will increase, as the data shows, and this will compound learning crisis. Finally, our findings highlight the importance of early childhood education, as this could facilitate the learning process and seamless transition of pupil into primary curriculum and ensure better performance. But holistically, what this is saying is early childhood education and other kind of investment by parents could prove and can, are quite effective in improving performance. So, thanks so much for listening.